A Zimbabwean refugee living in Raleigh who supports the opposition party to President Robert Mugabe says Essex police have guarded meetings of the movement's Southend branch. Stanford Biti, the chairman of the Southend Movement for Democratic Change, claims spies from President Mugabe's ruling ZANU-PF party have tried to listen in to what's discussed and report back to the regime. His comments come as the Movement for Democratic Change lodged a legal challenge against the results of last week's election, which was overwhelmingly won by Mr. Mugabe. It says hundreds of thousands of voters were turned away from polling stations. Stanford Biti fled the regime in 2006, but says attempts are made to monitor his meetings.
ZANU-PF set up a structure in the United Kingdom. It was about 3 weeks ago. Why would they need a structure in the United Kingdom? It is actually to spy on us, and it is actually to put our families who are actually back home in danger.
This is BBC Essex.
This is BBC Essex.
01245 49 50 50. Get those suggestions, keep them coming in, thank you. A Zimbabwean political refugee who fled the Robert Mugabe regime and now lives in Westcliff says last week's election victory for the dictator left him so depressed he actually went to bed fully clothed. Stanford Biti, the chairman of the Southend Movement for Democratic Change, left his home country 7 years ago, fearing for the safety of his friends and family. And the opposition Movement for Democratic Change party in Zimbabwe has lodged a legal challenge against the result, which returned President Robert Mugabe to power. It says the result should be declared null and void due to what it calls numerous irregularities. Its findings come amid claims that the votes of dead people were counted and 1 million people were disenfranchised. Robert Mugabe won his 7th term in office. Stanford Biti is one of 2,000 Zimbabwean refugees living in Essex.
I came into the United Kingdom in 2006 as a refugee, running away from the repression of Robert Mugabe.
And what were your hopes for this election?
We're expecting Robert Mugabe to go. There was no two ways of the results of the recent election. When people saw it that Robert Mugabe was actually winning, it was like a funeral. Even up to right now, a lot of people can't eat, can't work, they can't believe themselves, including Robert Mugabe himself and his family. He never expected to win.
Can you believe it?
I cannot believe it. Actually, when I actually noticed when the results came in, I could not even take my shoes off when I was going to bed. I just went to bed with my shoes, with everything. I could not eat, I could not talk to anyone. That was it. And that's how much I can tell you how I was so pained and how I could not believe it that Robert Mugabe was actually winning.
What sort of first-hand information do you hear? What's it like in Zimbabwe at the moment?
Shops are starting to run dry. I'm starting to hear that petrol is starting to run down. We don't have electricity in Zimbabwe. We don't have clean water in Zimbabwe. People are actually using water from wells and things of that sort. Things like cholera, they can fight it. They can never lose their lives. But the only thing which they fear most, more than death, is Robert Mugabe. So if you want to take a look at the way people vote in rural areas, they are not voting that they want Robert Mugabe. They are only voting that they will have peace and solace, that immediately after the election, they will not have anybody coming to account for their vote.
Now, Stanford Biti runs community groups and meetings for supporters of the MDC, the main political party opposing Robert Mugabe. He claims spies in Southend have tried to infiltrate those meetings to report back to Zimbabwe. He's so worried, he's had to call for assistance from Essex Police.
Would have our meetings being guarded by Essex Police, hoping that things have actually changed, but nothing's actually going to change. ZANU-PF set up a structure in the United Kingdom. Why would they need a structure in the United Kingdom? It is actually to spy on us, and it is actually to put our families who are actually back home in danger. And even for this last election, we sent quite a substantial amount from Southend-on-Sea branch right on the day of the election. And even right now, we have resources which we've actually reserved. If anybody, for any eventuality, like when they need emergency medication, safe houses, food, things of that sort.
Charles Dliwayo is another Zimbabwean refugee in Southend and helps run the local branch of the MDC opposition. He left his country in 2000 and hasn't seen his mother, wife and children for 13 years.
And in 2006 I couldn't go back because my young brother, who was one of the MDC member, was killed. The youth from the ZANU-PF met him, they killed him.
And how old was he?
He was 23. I wanted to go back to my country, but I couldn't because I knew that those people knew my brother. They knew me through my brother.
And do you have other family in Zimbabwe?
I still have my wife and children, 2 children. I do have my mother still in Zimbabwe.
And how long have you been apart from them?
That would mean from 2000 until now, that would be 13 years I haven't seen my children.
Do you speak to them?
Yeah, I do speak to them through the phone. Very, very difficult.
Do you worry about them?
Yeah, I do worry about them very much. And it was my wish that I thought maybe if something happened, we could win this election. It was my wish to go back and be with my family back because there was no change. I think it's a little bit difficult for me now to go back, and it has been hard for them to come to this country.
Do you think about seeing your wife and your children again? Do you think about that a lot, or do you try not to?
That's the first thing I always think about, seeing my family and be with my family once more. I felt very, very bad because we thought this was our time for us to see the change in Zimbabwe.
You would want to go back, but you'd go back with a gun. You'd go back and fight Robert Mugabe.
Yeah, we will definitely do that to remove Robert Mugabe from power.
And can you imagine a time where that would happen?
It could be soon. It could be soon, definitely, that we need change in our country.
Now, a Zimbabwean student in Basildon believes that there will be an uprising in her home country, similar to the Arab Spring, to remove President Robert Mugabe. The opposition movement for Democratic Change Party in Zimbabwe has lodged a legal challenge against the result, which returned President Robert Mugabe to power. It says the votes of dead people were counted and 1 million were disenfranchised. Robert Mugabe won his 7th term in office. Audrey Charowa fled to Britain several years ago, but says she started voicing opposition here to Mugabe. Things got tough for her family back home.
I came into England in 2004. I came in as a student, but prior to my coming here, my family was involved in farming. So we had bought a farm, very productive. We sold sunflower at the auction floors and all that. But all that ended in 2000 when the farm invasion started. My family were accused of being traitors, and the whole land redistribution, taking land from the wealthy white commercial farmers, giving it to blacks, was just whitewashed because my family was black, but it was taken away. There was some people that came with some youths, and they threatened my family with very violent acts. My mom was very scarred. She didn't speak for a year. So in the end, things were not getting better. Each year we'd say, things might all get better, will get better. Even after election. So I came to England. I figured if I come, I'll study a little bit, then I'll go back home. And things changed back home. I mean, my family was now threatened, really threatened. I was afraid to go back home, so I had to ask the United Kingdom government for protection, and thank God they granted it. But it's been a really tough struggle for my, not just myself, but my family as well. My family were being threatened because of the activities I was engaging in when I was here. Basically, I'm critical of some of the things the government does, the corruption, threats that to people. So someone has to tell that story. But my family were threatened because of that.
What do you hear from Zimbabwe now? What's it like now?
Right now, there's a lot of panic buying going on because people don't know, the markets are pretty uncertain. People don't know what it's going to be like tomorrow because there's talk of, if you look at social networking sites, people are thinking of basically going and doing an Arab Spring event, and the police are ready for that because they've sealed off Union Square, Africa Unity Square. They've sealed that off, which is one of the places that people tend to converge for protests and the like. So really there's a huge police and army presence even on the street. Between Harare and Dliwayo, you'll meet at least 14 roadblocks, police roadblocks, where they ask you where you're traveling to, what you're going to do, and that sort of thing. So basically your freedom of movement and freedom of association is curtailed.
Audrey Charowa, a Zimbabwean refugee living in Basildon. Well, she's calling on Prime Minister David Cameron to cut off all links with Zimbabwe to force Mugabe from power.
Isolation, because the reason why he stole the election to try and make it look legitimate was so that he could say to powers like the United Kingdom and the United States that, look, my people love me and, I'm supported by my people. But the fact is he stole that election. And what would be great for the United Kingdom is isolation, both diplomatically and economically as well. Because Mugabe he's just not a person who learns. He's a person who tries to steal by hook, crook and chicanery. We've heard good things coming out of the EU and the United States as well, saying that they didn't feel that this was a legitimate election. And if it really was, there should have been all international observers, not just SADC. I don't see why you can't do that. But it just feels like the whole nation has been raped. There's no better analogy for that. It is that deeply disturbing.
If that doesn't happen, if the international community doesn't come forward, what do you have to do? Do you have to Mugabe dies?
That's an uncomfortable question. I don't think there's any human being on the planet whose death has been looked forward to so much more than Robert Mugabe. I don't think even Hitler had people hate him this as much as people dislike Robert Mugabe.
That's Audrey Charowa speaking to BBC Essex Saturday Breakfast reporter Charlotte Haywood. A comment here coming by email from Darren, who's in Coggeshall. He says that's a very sad story indeed. A point I think of here is, though, that if there was any oil in Zimbabwe, both us and the Yanks would have dealt with him a long time back. Possibly, Darren. BBC Essex at 8:16.